Welcome back to ScreenFish Radio. I'm so glad you're here to you're able to join us today as we're talking about the Marvels, the latest entry into the MCU, and it is a divisive entry, but we have lots to talk about with it. And I'm thrilled today to have two wonderful guests. One who's been around and been a part of our show for a while, and one who's brand new. So welcome back, Mira, and welcome, Raevin Larue. I'm so glad to have you both. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having us. We're happy to be here.
Very excited for today's discussion.
I am too. I know there's going to be a lot to say about this one. With the Marvels, in case you weren't aware, the Marvels tells the story of Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, who has reclaimed her identity from the tyrannical Kree and taken revenge on the Supreme Intelligence. However, unintended consequences see her shouldering the burden of a destabilized universe when her duties send her to an anomalous wormhole linked to a Kree revolutionary. Her powers become entangled with two other superheroes to form the Marvels. And as always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers. But Raevin, Mira, let's have at it. What did you think of the Marvels?
I'm a pretty committed MCU fan. And I am a little bit ambiguous on this one. I thought some parts of the film were like fabulous, and there was a handful of other parts that were just, I couldn't suspend my disbelief. They were too ridiculous even for me. So the parts I loved, and the parts that I was like, is this for real? exist in there too.
I have to say I did adore this film. I really thought it was fun. I have found that a lot of these movies are kind of struggling to find their identity in phase 4 and 5 because they're like, should we be serious? Should we be comical? How do we, speak to our audiences? And how do we speak to the many voices and faces and, attitudes in our audiences? So I feel like they're really struggling to find their landing. But for me, I think they should be fun. And I found this movie to be really fun. I do think there are some things that didn't work, but I don't blame that on the writers, and I certainly don't blame that on the director. I think it's dealing with Marvel and Disney as a studio in these unprecedented times has really affected the quality of these films. But I really did enjoy it. I love Carol Danvers. I love Brie Larson playing Carol Danvers. So I thought it was good. It was fun.
It is a lot of fun. I agree with that. I'm decidedly more mixed. I'm hoping that this conversation will help me land on one side of the fence or the other. I really am. Because so much of what we like and don't like is personal preference. Like, let's say that, right? Like, it just is. Like, this, especially when you're dealing with comedy. Like, comedy is such a strange animal that way. Like, you could say, oh, this is the funniest movie in the world, and people stare blankly at it. Like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. But I like what you said, Raevin, there. Like, this phases 4 and 5 have struggled to find their footing.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's explore that a little bit, because what do you mean by that? I agree with that, but I want to know what you mean.
Well, for me, I mean, and I think this is the intention, but phase 4 and 5 is relaunching Marvel because we're done with Tony and Iron Man and Cap, and that saga's done. We're done with Thanos. So we're bringing in new characters. So they've gone back to the formula from 2008, which is to reintroduce new characters and give them backstory to set up a brand new threat, a new universe, a new relationship amongst the heroes. So, but this is, and I mean, this is just my opinion, but we're dealing with a very different culture than we were 10, 11 years ago. So I don't think the studio knows how to pander to a very diverse audience because the franchise for the last 10 years has been designed for white men. So, and I not to make it a race thing, but I don't think you can talk about Marvel and this new phase of Marvel and the introduction with all of these diverse characters without acknowledging the fact that this franchise was designed for white men and the white male fandom. They didn't think of the female fandom when they were doing, Iron Man, Captain America, even Black Widow. How sexualized was she for the entire duration of the franchise in phase 1 to 3 until the end when they start to acknowledge, hey, we made some mistakes. So I think when I say they're struggling to find their identity, they've introduced all of these existing characters that exist in Marvel Comics. And I love it. Personally, I love it. It's great. But they didn't think about marketing. I really don't think that the studio and Disney thought about, okay, how is this going to land with our core fandom? And is our core fandom, do they have the critical thinking skills to absorb these new territories that we're entering? So for Marvel to find their footing, they're still trying to be loyal to that core fan base, but also introduce a new fan base, and it's not working. It's not working. So there a lot of pandering is happening. A lot of sacrifice for storytelling is happening. That's what I mean when I say that. I guess I could be wrong, but that's my take from it.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I think too, my imagination tells me that they were just banking on the fandom being like Toronto Maple Leafs fans, right? Like they're in it no matter what, even if they're complaining and grumbling, they're still in it.
Oh, what a comparison! What a comparison! Why you got to go there?
But you know what I mean? Like I think they were really relying and banking on, and I don't even know that it's been fully conscious, the shift in thinking around like a master plan around diversifying in order to match the audience in the world that's changed around us. Or if it's been more, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. This is all speculation. Trying to be responsive in the moment. And that's why it feels a little piecemeal and fractured, because there hasn't been a big picture that carries it kind of through. Nobody thought ahead and went, this is where we're going to end up. So now let's work backwards on how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
It's interesting that these things you're bringing up, I think, are really interesting, because there's a number of things to unpack. First of all, I agree 100%. Like, you look back at early Marvel, the way it phases 1 through 3, white men. The hero, and it became a running joke. It was all white men having the same story. You can sub out Doctor Strange and drop in Tony Stark, and
Exactly.
there you go.
Yep.
Black Panther shook the world. And I think it was Honest Trailers or something made a joke about it, and it was or somebody made a joke about online about how in Black Panther is such a limited screen time in Infinity War because nobody knew what a big deal he was going to be when they did Black Panther. And I think that's probably a fair assessment, because it was structure. The emphasis was white males. Absolutely. There are a couple of things I'm seeing with this phase, because I actually, there's been a lot of this phase that I've liked. I don't want to pick it and say, I think Marvel fans, because Marvel became the pinnacle of pop culture, that's like it. Endgame is now the biggest film of all time, and it and Avatar go back and forth. And but one of the things I see with this one is, in their effort to tell stories that are more diverse, now they're telling everybody's stories all at the same time. And I think they've struggled to have, like, this was, I was thinking about this morning. One of the things that the first 3 phases had going for them is a clear bump. You knew the first phase was over with an Avengers film. And I'm not talking about focusing on who the characters are, but I'm saying we've got the story, then Avengers. We've got the story, then Avengers, and then Thanos becomes the big payoff. They said they announced Kang was the big payoff when they started phase 4.
Yeah.
And so there's this, like phase 4 ended with Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which is a fantastic film. And thematically feels like a wrap up to where they were dealing with, but it still feel like, is it over? Like, what? Oh, we just did this movie, and then there's this, and then you need to watch this movie, and they've got, with Disney Plus and with this, you've got the sheer volume of stories.
Yeah.
And they're good stories, but like you said, Raven, they're cranking them out so fast.
Yeah. And also, I want to add to that, with phase 1, 2, and 3, there was one villain. There is one central villain that was a threat to everybody. We're now dealing with multiverse, incursions. Loki's the god of stories now, which is great. Loki was awesome. But Kang is a threat. But let's be honest, and maybe it's just me, because maybe I'm not smart enough to understand like time travel and like multiversal stuff, but I'm confused. I am confused. I don't know what is going on half the time with these villains, but also there's no central villain to tie them together. So when they introduced Cap, Iron Man, Thor, they were brought together by Nick Fury to form a team because Nick knew that space is about to be a problem.
Yeah.
When we meet Shang-Chi, when we introduce Shuri as the new Black Panther, finishing Carol's story, these are great stories, but who's the villain here? Who are we? In these post-credit scenes used to be like a, what do you call them in books? An epilogue? Like an epilogue.
Yeah.
Little peek the next, how we're going to tie this to the next person's story we're going to watch, because there's that villain is still a threat. And it's like these little puzzle pieces that are coming together. Like if you edited them all together, it would be like the little break in between how Cap connects to Thor and Thor connects to whatever. Now these post-credit scenes are just like little like trailers for, ooh, someone else is joining the universe. It's hard to follow.
Yes.
So I don't think that this phase is bad. I think that Disney as a studio is very greedy. They are asking a lot for less, and their expectations are very high, and they're overworking the VFX departments.
Yeah.
They're using way too much CGI. They're sacrificing that for story, and they lost the plot. Even Bob Iger said, we lost the plot because they got a little too greedy. So Fortune, I actually wrote this down, guys. Like I came prepared with this, but Fortune talked about, it's a blog, I just discovered it. But they talked about how like the original Marvel formula was created because the first Marvel movie came out, was in production just before the writer's strike in 2007, 2008. So they were trying to wrap up this script. And then in the last moments, Feige and Favreau said, okay, we need a formula because, when we don't have time, then we need to figure out how we're going to adjust to make these movies. So this was their formula, guys. Okay. So any long-term planned ideas get scrapped if a better idea comes along. Special effects can be used if it's a reflection of the character. If they're up against a deadline, CGI was the best solution for any problem. So Fortune argues that the CGI thing has become their crutch now. And that's why I think we're seeing in phase 4 and 5 that we're seeing story being sacrificed, because they've used this formula to save Iron Man 1 now as like the foundation of how Marvel movies get made.
And just to go alongside that, again, it's tough because phase 1 through 3 really worked, and it was clear. It was clear what was going on. You could tell that Avengers was an experiment. Like we've got 4 films, and now we're building to Loki and the Battle of New York. And then it's like, wow, this is working. Let's tack on Thanos and come up with a plan for the next 10 years. Fine. That's great. It's working really well. But, you talk about the formula. What you also had because of this was more time with your characters.
Yeah.
So they had some one-offs. They did have some one-offs in those phases, but even Ant-Man got 2 movies. Doctor Strange had a solo one. Black Panther came in at the end, had a solo one. Spider-Man had a solo one, but they were all in phase 3. They were all coming. We knew. So Iron Man shows up in Spider-Man. You were more excited to see Iron Man in some ways than you were Tom Holland because we knew him.
That's true. That's a good point. We have that built relationship with these characters. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, that was one thing, going to the Marvels. I think that's one thing that we had going for the Marvels is that if you've kept up with it, and I use that with a huge asterisk because if you've kept up with it, if you missed a show, you're out. But if you've kept up with it, Kamala Harris. No, not Kamala Harris. She shows up.
President Kamala Harris.
Yeah, not Vice President. You didn't see her? Oh, she's in the end credit scene.
How did I miss that? Yeah.
Kamala Khan shows up, and we know her. We know her a little bit. We've at least spent some time with her. Captain Marvel, we haven't seen in several years. So some of and so many, that's what I mean. There's so many products firing out at you, and it's sort of like one passes the baton to the other sometimes, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's like, okay, but I'm just getting to know this person. I like this person. Loki is the only MCU show to get 2 seasons. The only one.
I know.
Yeah.
And we already knew him when it started.
Yeah.
But like I felt like at the end of Loki season 2, like my gosh, we've seen growth in him because we've watched it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would maybe argue that we didn't know him until the shows, because what we
Oh,
saw
well,
was
sure.
surface and output, right? But then you get to know him through the 2 seasons of Loki.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's interesting because again, like the first 3 phases, we spent a lot of time with some of these characters, and
Yeah.
yes, white men, I get it. I'm all for the diversity. I think it absolutely is wonderful that they're exploring so many different corners of the universe,
But it's the
and different
execution.
characters. But we got to spend some time with them. We
No,
gotta spend
Yeah.
some time.
I do want to say though, for Miss Captain Marvel, I don't think the issue is that we didn't spend enough time with Carol. I
Mhm.
think that there was too much space between her first movie and her second movie.
Yeah.
Because you actually go back and it's actually very sad if you think about Carol's story from first movie to second movie. Carol, we knew her personality in the first movie from the flashbacks. She was fun. She was a great friend. She was a good time. She was strong. She never gave up. She had that tenacity. But then her life was taken from her. And that movie was her remembering who she is, taking down the bad guy, and then recovering her memories. And then what happens? Okay, she's in space. She's trying to, help fix space, figure out who she is, remember who she is. And she gets a call from Fury years later, we need your help. From the time that Carol was taken from her life to recovering who she is, she's traumatized. She's broken. She doesn't know how to connect she doesn't feel like she has the right to go home, first of all, but she's learning how to be a hero in space. We don't get to see that. Carol Danvers is the protector of the universe. She really is so powerful. Not a lot of people can beat Carol Danvers. So in the second movie, I think because we saw her in Endgame and the other Marvel movies kind of shown up to take out Thanos, we didn't get to see Carol's trauma. So now in the second movie, we see that, okay, she's reconnecting with Photon. I can't remember Photon's actual character name, played by
Monica
the
Rambeau.
Monica Rambeau, thank you, played by Teyonah Parris. She's now seeing her for the first time, and she's still trying to recover her memory. She's still trying to recover who she is. Getting a version of Captain Marvel that's like still shook and also overwhelmed. She's a very overwhelmed hero in this movie. But so I feel like her character development and growth to where she started to how this movie ends actually is very good. But the problem is, like you said, Steve, we didn't get to see that.
Mm.
We don't get to
Oh my gosh.
connect with her in that way. And unless you are a reader of Marvel comics and a fan of Captain Marvel, I think as a friend of the source material, of course you're going to have that like bleeding heart, right? But if you are just someone who's watching the movies and hasn't seen Captain Marvel for the last, however many years her first movie came out, except for when she was fighting with, the gang in Endgame, of course it's hard to sympathize with her. But so like you said, you need to watch you need to watch Captain Marvel, the first one again, or any type of source material that includes Captain Marvel to really appreciate the Marvels, if for her storyline, I mean.
Oh, Raven, you just hit the nail on the head. That fills in the gap for me, because the comment I was gonna make, which I'm now going to modify thanks to the insight that you've added, is I was gonna say they're also trying to cram every kind of genre into each of the characters, right? So like some of the things I loved about this movie is I loved the interaction of the 3 female characters, right? Monica Rambeau, Ms.
So
Marvel,
good.
Captain
So
Marvel.
good.
Loved it. Every time the 3 of them were together, I was like, this is pretty rocking. But also some of the like humor, I was like, that's not like in the Carol Danvers that I know from only having watched the films and not being connected to the source material, and full disclosure, also having not watched Ms. Marvel, the series, which I think is detrimental to my understanding coming into the movie. I was like, this isn't the personality or the character that I am familiar with or I'm aware of. So I'm like, why is she trying to be funny? That's weird. Doesn't really fit, right?
Yeah.
Are they just trying to, everybody's got to be a comedian now because that worked for Thor? Like, what's going on? But I think the insight now is actually there's been a ton of character development, but it's not accessible if you're not connecting to the source material, if you're not revisiting or kind of intentionally bringing those things above the surface to connect them. And so what we're actually seeing is her growth and development and it's not even stepping back into her old self, because her old self doesn't exist anymore either. It's reintegrating her new self with the lost identity and the recovery of initial identity, and those need to be integrated into who she is now. And
Exactly.
that's what we're seeing. But if you didn't know that or realize that or aren't able to follow that, into your point, the trauma and the trauma recovery and the pace of that, you're like, who, I don't get it. Who is this? What's going on here? So
And,
that was like a good insight. Thank you.
and that was part of the magic of the Avengers, the first one, because it had never been done before. Not that it not that that was but what had never been done
Yeah.
before. You took these individual characters with their individual character arcs and threw them in a room together. But if
Mhm.
you just watch the Avengers, like it's a fun ride.
Yeah.
But like Tony's relationship to Cap is set up because you watched it, and there's only 4 films before it, maybe 5. Um, and so like with the Marvels, I thought there was actually seeds of that magic.
Mm.
Mhm.
But I'd spent like even Teyonah Parris's character, like that arc. If you haven't seen WandaVision, like
Mhm.
they just throw it in there and they just say, "Oh yeah, I was and walked through a wall of a witch hex." Like if you're new to this,
You're
unless
Yeah.
like,
you start,
what?
you're
Yeah.
like, "What?" And Kamala saying, "Oh, I time traveled." It's like, "Oh, how do you know it can do that?" "Oh, I did it before." If you haven't, there's now such a gambit of things with so many stories, and at least with phase 1, 2, 3, even if they branched off to take a Loki reference, if there was a bit of a branch, they always tied back in. And there hasn't been that tie-in because, and I guess that's part of this phase, is all the sacred timelines, yada yada yada.
Mhm.
But I think that definitely affected this film because it could have really, like I said, I like what you're saying there, Raven. I think we haven't spent enough time with Brie's story, and it's her movie. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Brie
um,
promised to become the face of the franchise, and they fumbled this so hard because what I would love to see in my own little universe, in my little mental universe, I would love to see Captain Marvel in like real life take on Tony Stark. I know he's dead, he's not coming back, but I would love to see these two just go at it because Tony, if you guys read Tony in the comics, we know anytime Tony Stark shows up, everything becomes exponentially worse.
mhm.
And Brie is a leader with a sense of justice, and she's always going to make sacrifices to do the right thing. But her versus Tony, I just feel like would have been really great, like great to watch. I would love to see the franchise be built around these two ideologies and these two kind of go at it, but that'll never happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, except for I think part of the point of, or the value of the multiverse and the fracturing is never say never. It's just an alternate universe.
They gave him such an arc. I don't. I'm all for like cameos and all that stuff, but I don't. I would love to see that too, Raven. But I also wouldn't.
Yeah,
Yes.
no,
It's,
exactly.
it's
Not
like
now.
I don't want.
Too late.
I want Downey to show up for show up for 5 minutes in whatever the multiverse, whatever it is, the Secret Wars, and just look at the camera and then do something cool. That's all I want. Like come in and say hi.
Want that. I don't even want
You don't
that.
want that?
No, I think their stories are done and they were done beautifully. Should Tony have been the one to do the snap? No, but for storytelling, I guess he needed to be.
Well,
I think that was the worst thing to do was make him do the snap, but that's a conversation for another time. But I don't think that I want to see these guys. I know they're going to come back because Marvel is scrambling right now. But going back to something you mentioned earlier about the introduction of Black Panther, here's my attitude about this. Everybody was so happy to see Black Panther because the Marvel universe was not built around Black Panther. The big issue with the core fan base is that white men who've been growing with the franchise feel like they have the authority on the franchise because it was designed for them. So of course they're happy to see one diverse character show up, but to have phase 4 and 5 be built around all characters that are not white, this is pissing them off. They don't like it because they're not at the center of this franchise anymore. So when I talk about toxic fandom, especially with the Marvels, I don't think the Marvels stood a chance because even before the movie came out, the fandom was already on their negative stuff about this film. And I kind of want to segue into the attitude about it being a flop. And the lack of journalistic integrity, I feel like, with all of these blogs that write about pop culture and Marvel cinema and all of that, because they're calling it, even before the movie came out, the fandom, I felt like, was just expecting this movie to fail. And because of Brie Larson, is it because it's a female-led film? Maybe, but I also think it's because they don't like that they are not at the center of this franchise anymore.
Yeah.
And which doesn't make sense to me, because if you're looking at Marvel, Shang-Chi's a real character. Like, Miss Marvel's a real character. The source material is there, guys. You don't want to see these people come to life on screen? So it's because they're not at the center of this franchise anymore. So even when this movie came out, all of that toxicity was bleeding into the movie. Then we get a writer's strike. We get the SAG actor strike and the writer's strike. There's no press for the movie. So now that they're really sinking, because there's no press tour for this film. Okay, the actor strike ends after the movie comes out, and now they can do press. But now they're facing the whole, it was a flop. It only did 167 million in the box office. That is not a flop. It's a loss for the studio. 220 million it took to make the movie. To earn 167 million, that's not a flop. 16 million is a flop, not 167 million. But yet you have all of these like news sources writing about this as the narrative of this movie. Nobody wanted this movie to win.
Yeah.
As we've discussed, there are really valid points to why this movie wasn't great, but it's not a bad movie. It's not a bad, and unfortunately, the fandom, the narrative that has become Marvel, scattering, not knowing who to appeal to, not knowing how to, really make these movies stick anymore. There's a lot of things at play here, but the only people that suffer truly are the women. There's only been 4 female directors for Marvel movies in the 33 movies that have been made. 2 of them are women of color. Okay. So in my humble opinion, I feel like this movie didn't stand a chance. And even if you wanted to go in and just enjoy a movie, you couldn't have, because the narrative publicly has all been negative. I just feel so bad, because really, if you're going in non-biased, you could really enjoy the relationship and the chemistry between the girls, You could enjoy maybe the silliness that was that musical scene, because it's just a movie. But this movie didn't get to be just a movie, right? It had to be a political statement. It had to be another stain on phase 4 and 5. I feel bad. I feel bad for them all.
It's interesting. Go ahead, Steve.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting that you call it like female directors as well, because The Eternals was another one, which I loved that movie. And it also like just was critiqued very harshly and very unloved. And I thought it was beautiful, actually. But there's another woman of color who was the director of that film. So I didn't make those connections, but it's interesting. I will say too, the only thing I was going to say is everybody that I've talked to. So again, I kind of came out mixed. And to be honest, the musical scene is one of the things that I thought was like ridiculous and over the top, which is kind of nuts, because actually I love dance. Like, dance is one of my favorite things in this world. But I was like, no, this doesn't fit here. It's a bit ridiculous. Or that joke about like he's bilingual. I was like, wow, that was really dumb. But so that part like didn't land well for me. But everybody I've talked to about the film since I saw it has only had positive things to say. So everybody that's like, oh yeah, I saw it. It was really great. And I was like, oh, you think so? I'm like, I thought it was okay. They're like, what do you mean okay? It was so awesome. And so I've been surprised by that, because to your point, the public narrative is quite negative around it.
Well, I'm happy to hear people are liking it.
That's what I mean. It is divisive. Like, it's very funny. Like, I know some people that think I loved it, and I know some people that said it is gutter trash. Like, it is just like the gambit of this one, and the drop off. Like, I think it had a 78% drop in its second weekend. Is staggering. Like, the Marvel record prior to that was Doctor Strange at 54%. This is better than the Doctor Strange movie. I didn't like that one at all.
Hard agree. Yeah.
But see, I'm so torn, because first of all, I agree with you, Raevin, everything you said there, because I think that with this particular one, it was fighting an uphill battle. And let's remember that the first Marvel film, really, I think the first one to be review bombed was Captain Marvel.
It was.
It was absolutely. It was like, oh, we need a female hero. Yes, we do.
We desperately do, guys.
I agree.
Other fandom, female heroes exist in the Marvel comics, so I don't know why you think we would only be making comics with men at the center. Who wants? This audience is not ready for X-Men. I'm telling you that right now. They are not ready for X-Men. They don't have the sensibilities for it.
Which is funny because X-Men's been around for. I mean, X-Men's been around
Oh,
forever. I mean,
forever.
the first film was 2000, so it's not like anyway. But
but X-Men also had a cinematic connection. So for Marvel, it was comics, then movies, now shows and movies.
Right.
X-Men though was comics, TV show, reboot of the TV show, and then movies.
That's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
It's a little bit more, a step kind of in those directions. Yeah.
I will say this. I adored the three of them together. I wanted more of that. This is why I say I'm split on the film, because there were things I like. I thought DaCosta directed the heck out of it. I thought she knows her way around an action scene.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought they did that scene where they were morphing in and out. That first
scene
was
so tight.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So tight. So good.
Really
I was like cheering. I'm like, yeah, kick her out.
I agree. Loved it.
Loved it.
So good. So good. The things I didn't like, again, are personal choice. I didn't like the dance scene. I didn't like the flirkins. They're flirkins, right? The cats.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this morning too. And this is again, I'm not the guy who made the film. I'm not in the editing room. But like, I thought, you slowed it down too. Like you could have made this, given it the fury that you gave it before, but by playing, and I get it, it's from Cats, but by playing memory in the background, it actually slows the scene down. Like I know Captain Marvel playing I'm Just a Girl, like it was a little on the nose, but like but it had the pop. Like it had the pop. Like if you'd made that scene as wacky as it could have been, as opposed to, then it might have worked better. But the song and dance, I said to you before, Raven, we were talking on the phone, I didn't think it was earned. Like in Marvels, like when they had the Bollywood scene in Marvels, it made sense. It made sense.
You mean
in Eternals.
Yes.
And I know there's lots of criticism for the Eternals. I liked it a lot too. But in that scene, it actually made sense. He's making a Bollywood film. We're doing a Bollywood number.
Yeah.
And that's when it was like, what would be funny if they sang and that was their language. And it was just, to me, it didn't land. That's why it didn't earn it. But I felt like this one was hacked to pieces in the editing room, which there was so much that could have been done. And I can't believe I'm saying this because we actually got a movie that was under 2 hours. I think it should have been longer.
Me too. I totally agree with you there. It definitely should have had a longer runtime.
Again, like we've talked about that relationship.
Yeah, maybe if they focused on the building of the relationships, it didn't. So the two parts that I also were like, really, this is ridiculous. Like I mentioned, was the dancing planet and the musical scene, and the cats as well. I was like, oh, this is just like it's fun and interesting when it's one cat and you're like, oh, that's how Nick Fury got his look, right? Yeah. But then when it's a bunch of, I like that just didn't. It felt too far reaching for me, and I didn't kind of buy into it. So because of those parts, the movie felt like I don't think I could have handled more time with the way that it was running. But I think because I will say the other thing that I thought was really cool and I think unique to not only a diverse cast, but also a fully female led kind of heroes, was how quickly they got to cooperation. Like if you compare them to the Avengers, right? The Avengers, even it was almost co-opetition even at the end as opposed to full-on cooperation, right?
I like that.
I like that word.
Yeah.
Did you just coin that word? That's a good word.
I wish I had. No, I've heard it before, but you know what I mean? Like, and it was a little bit of like look at me, I fight better than you. So there was still a competition within the way the Avengers were cooperating. But the women in the Marvels, like they got there so much faster. And I loved like the montage of just them learning to use their powers in unison, in addition to like the kick-ass fight scenes, because those were so neat with the switching and the
Can I segue to Nick Fury for a second though? I felt like I love Nick Fury. He's great. But what was the point of Secret Invasion this summer? Because I don't know who that Nick Fury was in the movie, because that wasn't Nick Fury who's a spy underground in Secret Invasion and the Skrulls have taken over government. Not that that necessarily needed to be a part of the plot, but wouldn't that kind of make sense to bring it up? Or maybe
Yeah.
I just felt like Secret Invasion didn't happen.
Yeah.
Also, to the people who say this is a flop, all the writers who say it's a flop, Secret Invasion took 200 million to make. So I don't think it made 167 million
One weekend. Yeah.
of earnings. So in one weekend. So I just felt like Nick just felt like I don't even know who that Nick was. He was unrecognizable to me.
Steve, do you know, I'm wondering if because of the writers' strike and the SAG-AFTRA strike, if they reversed the order of release? Because remember that was WandaVision and Falcon and the
That's
Winter
how
Soldier?
the pandemic changed that. Yes. I haven't heard anything with this, although
Okay.
actually, I think I would have to go back and check, but I know
Yeah.
that there's been fallout from the Iger rehiring.
Okay.
So that happened last year when Chapek was ousted in the middle of the night. Like I think the news broke at
Oh,
11 p.m. Like it was so late that I said to my wife, I said, "There's going to be some scandal that comes out that we find out later." But there wasn't. They just were like, "You're done."
yeah.
And they brought in Iger, and I know one of the things that Iger did is he slowed down the movie releases because the big complaint was there's just too much.
It's too
Yeah.
So
much.
it's possible, but I don't know. I
Because
think that this was supposed to come out in August, but I
that
could
may
be
be
wrong.
then,
Mhm.
that could be the answer to the
Nick Fury
like
situation.
fractured the Nick Fury situation. Because there was a couple things between WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I remember, but I was like, this
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. And it was like, oh, they reversed the order of release. It would have made sense if it was the other way around.
It
Yes,
was
yes.
what's her name from Seinfeld? Julia Louis-Dreyfus's introduction seemed awkward in
That's
that one,
right.
as opposed to because it was weirdly
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
That was a big thing. Yeah, you're right. You're right. But WandaVision was ready first. And
Right. And it was a great anyways, it was a more powerful, I think, launch into them doing TV serials. But I'm just wondering if maybe that's the impact of the character, like the Nick being different than the how he was built up to
Mhm.
be. And then if that also, because it was also released at the same time as Loki season 2, right? So same date. Am I remembering that right?
Not the same
no,
date.
it ended. It
Ended. Yeah.
ended the same day as Loki.
Okay.
So Loki, yeah, and there were supposed to be like two other series released this year.
Right.
They pushed Echo to January, and they were going to do X-Men '97, the reboot of your favorite show of all time here.
Yeah.
They were going to do
Thank you.
that,
Thank you.
and What If? That's three shows. What If was good. Oh, What If
Yeah.
is still coming this year, but at
December
the end of
22nd.
December.
December 22nd. Yeah.
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 So there again, like when Iger took over, they went, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
Let's pump the brakes a little bit. And I think part of that is the pandemic. We were so bored. Like we
Yeah.
wanted,
Yeah.
give me more stuff, and we need the content. And Disney Plus, I think Disney Plus launched in November of 19.
Mhm.
So it was like
Yeah.
brand new, or
Yeah.
it might have been November 18, but I think it was November 19.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
No,
yeah,
I think it's actually a smart call to slow down, though, to be honest, to a lot of the points that Raven made earlier, right? Is where we've sacrificed storytelling, we've sacrificed, and like we've changed as, like, I think our physiology has even shifted with all of the media that we're consuming, how quickly we're consuming it, like how often. I'm certainly guilty of like scanning social media on my phone while I'm trying to watch something on the TV, while I'm like, I've just kind of been super scattered and made my interactions like confetti. I'm very bad at monotasking, even though that's the way our brains are ideally set up. But I
Mhm.
wonder if it's a very smart move on Iger's part to slow things down so that we actually have time not just to consume, but to appreciate and like work through before we pick up the next piece, right? Like if we're crunching through it like candy, then
Yeah.
we're not actually getting a chance to let it sit and make sense, think about it, talk about it, any of those things.
I think now that we've kind of talked this out, I think I'm gonna backtrack for a second. Now I
can't
don't
do it.
know.
Can't do it. No
Can't
back.
do it. Oh no. It's gospel now. It's
That's it.
gospel now. But I think that, to be honest, the amount that they're pumping out isn't necessarily the problem. It's
Mm,
the way they're doing it.
sure.
We have one too many threats. We can't get invested in them.
Yeah.
Everybody's off doing their own thing, which could be fine if, like, in phase 1 to 3, we were all moving towards the same goal, the same threat. But we've got way too many things to go on to care about, and it's just hard to care when you're being bombarded. You're getting that fatigue. So I don't think it's necessarily Marvel fatigue. I love Marvel comics, so I will watch anything they put out till I die. I've been doing this since I was like 17, so it's just that the storytelling has been sacrificed. Disney as a studio in Marvel, I think they're butting heads. I know they fired some of the showrunners for different shows. They've been cutting corners. I think that's just ultimately it's been a sacrifice of storytelling, greed, and asking for a lot more for way less. I mean, the VFX department at Disney are unionizing now. So, like, what does that tell you? They're overworked, they're tired, underpaid. Nobody cares. The love, the labor of love that made Marvel so special isn't there, and we're starting to dissipate into DC problems. So, like, we used to be the top of the food chain. Now we're like just literally giving away crap. So I think that it's not so much the amount, but there's no unified mind here.
Yeah. Which is exactly what you said up front. So you didn't, I guess what I'm wondering is if the slowdown will give them room to make changes.
Well, everything's being postponed to 2025.
Yeah.
So who knows? But now Blade's going through rewrites. Apparently Kang, they're thinking about writing out Kang, which is absurd. Like, absurd. I don't know what Jonathan Majors did, because I think he was acquitted. But
No, it's still going on.
Oh, it's still ongoing. Okay. Because I thought that it came at that, she had said that this didn't happen. This isn't what went down, but maybe not. I don't know. But either way, like, use the multiversal storyline to recast him.
Yeah.
Don't get rid of Kang. Are you crazy? This is good. You might as well just quit now. You can't save this. We're too deep into the Kang Conqueror storyline. We've got what, 4 movies now with him, plus Loki. Like,
I don't know why they can't recast. I honestly don't. I mean, they've already established that different people can be different things in different stories, but like, just like, why you got to burn? If they burned him, if they burn not the actor, if they burn the character,
yeah,
then what have we done the last 3 years?
So what was the point?
Yeah, because I think he was intended to be the unifying villain, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, listen, soap operas have been doing it since the dawn of soap operas, and nobody better than I. One character is suddenly played by a new actor, and at first you're like, "Oh, this is weird," and everybody's like, "Okay, that's the character now." Like,
yeah,
they did it here.
Yeah,
they did it to Hulk, and they did it to Rhodey.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they did. You're right. 2 times. So just recast him. Just recast and move on. Like
if that. Yeah, if the reason they're considering dropping it is because of the actor, they have alternatives. They can recast. Yeah.
He's great to watch, but not worth the sacrifice. So just bring somebody else in.
And Raven, I'll add something to what you were saying there too. We are now, I don't know what, however many, 2 things. First of all, I don't know however many movies we're into phase 4 and 5.
Sorry.
And there's a giant hand reaching out of the polar ice caps, and nobody's addressed it.
Oh my god! Right? Not a single. And that and White Vision. Are we supposed to keep White Vision now?
Well, okay, but I'm okay with that because that felt like a story you're going to come back to. And this is just like a hand out there, and nobody's noticed. Like it's like it's. But and here's the other thing too. You said that they pushed everything back to 2025. Let's think about this for a moment. The entire arc for Thanos took 11 years, and now you're trying to do it in 5.
Yeah.
And do it in 5. You earned it before. Don't just but the problem, I mean, there's other problems too. Like, people just want to get right to the big stuff now because we had that with Endgame. But I do think that those are problems. But I also think there's been good content. Like, it hasn't all been trash. There's been things I liked more than others, but they hasn't all been trash. There's been some really great stuff. Wakanda Forever is incredible.
Oh, so good.
Just incredible film. Oscar nominated. was the Spider-Man No Way Home. Incredible film.
Yeah, really enjoyed that
There's
too.
been WandaVision. I still think that's like peak
Oh,
Marvel. I
incredible.
think it's
Yeah.
incredible. But and it's interesting. Okay, I'm gonna cycle way back here because something that we were talking about before. I like the how you address the trio in this film because I think the trio of this film is the soul of the film.
Yeah,
Like the way that they come together, I think is just their scenes. I wanted more of that.
me too.
That's what I wanted more of.
Yeah.
You can give me all the people eating cats you want, but
Mhm.
that was the bedrock. And I think that it showed you, and we've already talked about this a little bit, but I mean, I talked about the power of together, and not only certainly female led together. So obviously, hi boy, um, didn't really understand connected, but I appreciated it. I was like, this is beautiful. This is what the film needs to be,
Yeah, and it's
and
the
it's
first
so
time we're
different. Go ahead, Raven.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Um, it's the first time we're demonstrating female leadership as superheroes. I know that there was a big complaint when Endgame, when you had that montage of all the female heroes kind of pulling up on Thanos or whatever. But everyone, well, not everyone, but the pushback was that it wasn't earned. Some of those women hadn't even met. They don't know each other. Why would they all just kind of band together like that? It felt like you were pandering once again because Marvel, too late in the game, realized, oh, we've created monsters of our fandom. They are a problem. And now we need to kind of backtrack. So having the Marvels be the kind of like the first female-led film where they're all heroes in their own strengths and their own tenacity and their own intelligence and their own skills come together and lead and take down this villain who's also female, who has her own. We got to talk about her too. We got to get to that.
Yeah.
They're fun. They're coming together. And what you said, Mira, they so quickly learned how to work together. And they learned how to work together so quickly because of the mutual respect, regardless of what was going on between Monica and Carol and their kind of history. And then, Kamala joining being like a fangirl of and also just wanting to be a hero, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of their own little issues and personality quirks, they knew what was at stake and they respected each other first.
Mhm.
To me, that was overlooked in all of the reviews because there have been studies to show women just work together better in general. So having that and then having them not be in direct competition, not being malicious and just being leaders individually who come together and learn how to be leaders and put aside their own stuff, to me, that was a very beautiful statement. Regardless if it was floppy or not, them showing that we're the first trio in Marvel to like be superheroes and we're leaders to make sacrifices. And there's no man at the center of this. That was awesome. And that's a really good image for female viewers, young little girls, especially when they dress up at Comic-Con. They have options now. And they don't just have options, they know that despite whatever an issue is, women are strong and they're smart and they can work together and they can work out their problems. And I just think that was so well done, really well done. And I think that was the message of togetherness, that it wasn't forced, it was just natural because it comes natural to women as leaders.
And I thought that the other thing that was neat about that too is like the supporting the circle around them that supported. So I think about like Kamala's family, who I love the way it was so perfect. Like they're so perfect because you're like, yep, if that was for reals, that's exactly how a family would act. Like I feel it, I believe it. It's not a random cat that just eats people for fun. Like I buy this part.
Love
right?
them.
Yeah. But I thought that was also a really big piece to it too, which is also, I think, a paradigm shift and significant in the way that research tells us how kind of women interact and function, right? Is that networks, although networking comes more naturally to men because the way society's set up patriarchally, but the way that women engage their networks and their support systems is different. And I thought that was also kind of laid out neatly in the film, right? So even in Carol's so Kamala's family, we know they were a very like obvious and visible kind of part to that. But even in the way that Carol was having the flashbacks in her apprehension about reconnecting with Monica, you could see that that was her support system, right? They were that was where she drew her strength from in her original self before some of that shuffle over. And I thought that was really neat that we got to see not only the three of them working together and women as the leads, but also the way, like, the important part of building the community and the network around you that makes that possible.
I feel like this should be an episode just talking about like female-led movies throughout like the decades, because there's so much, they've evolved so much. I think back when I was younger, the Charlie's Angels, I know people kind of like hated that, but I loved Charlie's Angels. They were so fun. And this was a far worse time to have, you know, ladies in the box office leading a movie. It was way harder back then in 1999, 2000. Like it, so I feel like there's there's stuff to be really dissected, like the evolution of, you know, female women leading the box office.
You know, it's funny. I think Heather, she's one of our team members, and I remember her saying to me about Black Widow, the Black Widow movie. One of the things she liked was her hair. And I was like,
not Black
Widow.
Oh, yes,
because she's battle ready with her hair in that film, and I was like, I mean, again, male. Never clued in. I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like even Wonder Woman, the hair flips, you know, like she's all, and Black Widow's always been like whoosh, you know, when she's doing her things and stuff. But this was like, I'm here to actually go. It's been a huge change. And I agree.
Yeah, that hair, and it's funny because we talked about it like with Heather, and then it came up in a lot of the media posts around too, right? Is like, nobody's going into battle with their hair all like wild and flowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So the braided hair up from Frances Pugh was a really big deal to kind of be like, this is a little bit more realistic, and it's good to see that.
Now we need to talk about the villain.
The
real.
Let's talk about her. I don't remember much about her. Please tell me what you think.
I need to pull up the actress's name because I think it's Asha.
I know that she is Tom Hiddleston's life partner, and I thought that was kind of funky. So they're both like in the box office at the same time. They both kind of play villain. Just some interesting pieces. One of the things that I will say that I thought was neat about this villain, she was a little bit understated. I'm down on that if you compare her to like a Thanos or a Kang or any of those other villains. But what I thought was really more pronounced and more believable with her than say with a Thanos is that she really was she just believed so strongly in her cause. And so she was driven to the point of her own destruction in support of the cause that she was driving behind, right? And her planet, her people, the supreme intelligence that was destroyed. Like she was sacrificing herself for her cause, and the cause, like, I could connect to it. I had some empathy for her as a villain, where Thanos is deciding we're going to deal with like sustainability and population problems by just like snapping out half of the world. I was like, I'm not like, I can't get behind appreciating that perspective, agree or disagree with it, right? So I disagree with her, but I can appreciate her perspective, which I think was new for me in terms of a villain.
Yeah. So her name's Darben. I had to look it up because I forgot the name, and it's played by Zawe Ashton, who's just awesome.
Love Zawe Ashton. I love her.
She's great, great to watch. I feel like, first off, as a villain, this is where I have to speak a little negative about the film, because everybody, I know, a lot of the critics were saying that there was no stakes in her as a villain. I feel like if her story had ended differently, people would have appreciated her. So let's think about what really happened here. Captain Marvel left her planet in destitute. She was out for blood. She thought that she was doing the right thing. She like took out their life source because, like, you know, the Kree are the bad guys, and she wasn't thinking. And that's the part of the guilt that Captain Marvel feels that's driving this movie, and why she felt so ashamed to go home, and why she never went home, because she thought she had to make this right. It's also her driving force for why she's so fiercely protective of the universe and trying to make the right choices. She's got a lot on her shoulders. But Zalwe Ashton's character, she was an unassuming victim who stepped up to the plate to help her people. So I don't think that she was a tyrannical type. In fact, those last moments where she goes and tries to kill Captain Marvel, or what did they call her?
The Annihilator?
The Annihilator.
Yeah.
It made no sense to her character at all. This is a woman who had to step up and help her people who've been left with no sun, no food, no water. They've spent how many years trying to keep these people alive, her people alive. She's actually not a bad guy. So in those last moments in that fight with them, when they were trying to reason with her, and she's saying, for Hala, for my people, if she had just been able to live and didn't snap back and try to kill Carol and the rest of them, that would have been a great change of events for Marvel, something they've never done before. And they did the same thing with Christian Bale in Love and Thunder. Christian Bale's character, the killer of gods, he is right. These gods are tyrannical. One thing that we talked about on the phone, Steve, is how these movies are very, very much propaganda for American imperialism or American imperialist ideologies. And it pops up in every story they put out. The villain has to be a psychopath. He just can't be reasoned with. Her villain, she's not a villain. Captain Marvel is the villain to her because she left them in destitute. She did what she had to do. Them trying to make her some tyrannical person in those last moments is what undid the power of her presence. If she had lived and said for Hala and made a peace agreement, and Captain Marvel was able to really say, I'm sorry for what I did, and they kind of worked it out, they don't need to be besties, but they do need to find I guess Captain Marvel went and turned the sun back on with her amazing power. But maybe if, Dar-Benn had lived and Captain Marvel said, I will do this for you, I will bring life back to this planet, and I took it away, that would have been such good writing. That is how you write a compelling villain.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Dar-Benn is not a villain. She's an anti-hero for her people. But Marvel has a problem with saying that, and I say this for all of the movies, especially in phase 1 to 3, but they have a problem with creating empathetic anti-heroes. But they're okay to do it maybe in the shows, I guess. But these movies, they're all the same. They just have to be so tyrannical and like crazy, and they get lost in their purpose. How are you going to get lost in a purpose of trying to keep your planet alive when some superpowered person came and left you in destitute? There's no reasoning with these types of villains when they write them this way. And I truly think that would have saved the movie if they made that decision.
And would have been a great redemption arc for Captain Marvel too, right? So the guilt she's carrying. It makes me wonder if it's an issue of timing, is because in the shows they have time to build the characters. And in the movies they don't, because as you were speaking, what you made me think of, now I'm completely switching genres sort of, but I think about like the ending of Game of Thrones and how quickly they flipped the switch on Khaleesi, right, who was this compassionate leader who broke people out of slavery and gave them life again, to like, inheriting the madness of her father and indiscriminately killing a bunch of innocent people, and then having to be murdered to be stopped from continuing that behavior, right? So and that, I mean, Game of Thrones had lots of time, although the criticism there was that the last year was rushed as they're trying to close it out. So I wonder if it's an issue of timing, or if it is just people don't know how to write real whole people and women specifically in this respect.
It again, I even if the film was 20 minutes longer, they could have helped a lot of that, because I agree with absolutely everything you both have said. I think the premise of her was interesting. Again, it all happened very quickly. I saw it twice, and it was the second time I figured out what she was really trying to do, because it just seemed like it was, I understand that she was trying to help her people. I got that. And I remember thinking, oh, she's not that bad. And then she killed half the Skrulls for just because reasons. And I was like, oh, she, okay. But as I'm watching it, I'm like, you have a story, you have a character, and she becomes Monster of the Week. She becomes the Inquisitor, or whatever, or all those guys that sort of in the middle of the Marvels movie just showed up.
Yeah.
And it was like you could have done something here. And again, it's funny because I in some ways I find it hard to be critical because ultimately, like, I'm not writing the thing, so
Mhm.
I don't know. But I'm sitting
Mm.
here as a viewer saying this is what I didn't connect with. But there was so much potential with her, and I agree. Like, I hadn't thought of it that way. But if they had written her ending, her finale a little better, it might have felt a little more complete. Because when you first meet her, she's just trying to look out for her people. Like, they've had their
Yeah.
lives ruined by this other
Mm.
woman, and it was never killing Carol Danvers was never the problem. It was just leave us alone. It was
Yes.
like
But that's the
I
point. She wasn't even Carol Danvers. She wasn't Captain Marvel. She was just an annihilator to them. She just came and she like took away everything from them and left them in destitute to starve in struggle. So to
Mm.
them, this is Disney. I don't know if it's Disney or Marvel, or maybe they're just trying to keep it like camp for the kids who watch it to say there is evil and there is good. And there's no gray area. But it's such a mistake. Such a writing mistake to keep writing these villains this way, because it's suggesting that being all powerful makes you morally right, and
mm,
that is not true.
Yeah.
And especially when we get into bringing in the X-Men, as I was telling Steve, they're not ready for X-Men because first they don't know how to write anti-heroes. They don't know how to address that there are gray areas when it comes to power,
mm,
when it comes to
Yeah.
people who are at the top and make the decisions, when it comes to the gods in Love and Thunder, the gods, not all of them, but most of them are greedy. They don't care about humans. They don't care about feeding them. And you've got these people, these civilians praying to them, thinking that, oh, all of the suffering is for a purpose. Wouldn't that villain, I can't remember his name, the one Christian Bale played, wouldn't it have been so much more sympathetic for Thor to say, whoa, like, you guys are awful. I can understand why he hates us and why he's trying to kill us. Let me go try to make this right. But to punish this person who's already been punished, like, think of somebody who's unhoused and has no food and has
Mm.
no clothes and holes in his shoes and has to sleep outside in the winter. You're going to tell that person that they're a psycho for trying to find ways to live. They're crazy for robbing at Tim Hortons to get some food in their belly. This is the way they're writing these villains is a mistake. And this is why I think this is where they're sacrificing story.
And I think it, especially considering where we are today in society, like, it's such a missed opportunity. Because I think one of the things that happens quite regularly is that once somebody claims the moral high ground, and I'll use air quotes for that, that kills the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Because what conversation can we have if you are morally superior,
Mm-hmm. And it
right?
also highlights, could Thanos really be the villain in phase 1 to 3 when you've got gods acting the way they do in 4 and 5, and Captain Marvel going and putting an entire planet in destitute and just being like, oh, this is fine until it's not fine.
mm,
It completely dilutes the
Yeah.
first part of the entire stories.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I agree. It's such a good point. I'm like, oh yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
came
true.
prepared, guys. I'm like, I
I know
really need to.
you're on
Oh,
fire.
super exciting. Yeah. Yeah. Makes for absolutely great discussion and good insights. Yeah.
Mm. Um, but that's what's going to kill me here because we are running out of time. Which I'm not trying. This is so good. I could keep going, but this is usually where we start to wrap it up. So, um, we should screen it or skip it. The Marvels, screen it or skip it. This could be a tricky one.
You go first, Mira.
Uh yeah, I'm struggling with it. I would say screen it, but be okay with it not being your favorite Marvel movie.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? Like, don't, if you're going in expecting it to be the best one, you're going to be disappointed, but I still think it's worth a big screen experience.
I say screen it. Yeah, definitely screen it. It's fun. Ultimately, it's fun. We're just a bunch of nerds who are really neat in this stuff. We just really love talking about pop culture and movies and Marvel. So go screen it. You'll have a good time.
I'm gonna cheat. Because I'm
Oh, you're
like,
going to stream it, aren't
I'm
you?
gonna stream it.
Yeah.
Hey, look, it's a big space opera and it looks great on the big screen when it's working. It's a lot of fun. And I also will also say I think this will be one of those movies like Avengers Age of Ultron that you look back on and say that was actually an incredibly important piece
Yes.
to where this
Mhm.
story ends up going. So because Age of Ultron people were mixed on as well, but when you look back, it's like, oh yeah, Age of Ultron was like essential to where they ended up going. I
The
feel like this
story.
could be that film. I also feel like you could wait for Disney Plus. I just do. I go back and forth. It's not. I agree. I said I'm mixed.
Yeah.
There are things I truly love about this film. I think this film proves that Iman Vellani is the future of
Amazing.
Marvel.
Yes.
She's Tom Holland. She's Tom Holland. You can
Yeah.
build on her for the next 5 years, 10 years. You can do it. She's incredible.
Yeah.
Teyonah Parris is wonderful in this film. Brie Larson is very good in this film. I don't love her as much as you both do, but I think she's very good in this film. She's clearly having more fun. But I'm
Yeah.
okay with waiting till streaming on this one. That's just my opinion. I think it's
Do you think-
important. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sir, you're wrong. Your opinion is
No. I think
I
like
claim moral high ground.
I was teetering
conversation's
between,
done.
yeah, I was teetering between stream it and screen it, to be honest. So I hear you. I think the only reason I would say screen it over stream it is because I do think there's just some impact of the big screen, of the bass that kind of makes your heart rumble a bit.
Yeah.
For some of the visuals and the fight scenes. Although you did, and I know we finished talking about this, so I promise I'm not going to turn this into a huge conversation, but I'm very curious about if they'll ever put Ms. Marvel together with America Chavez. That would be kind of a
Yes.
neat. Yeah.
Oh yes,
happening.
that's the young Avengers are being formed as we speak. They were not
Oh,
subtle.
that's going to be pretty awesome. I think
Yeah.
that's going to be really good.
Yeah, I think that'll be a lot of fun. And I mean, they flat out tell you that's what she's doing. And actually, I saw that and I went, "Oh, she's in charge." And I thought, "No, she should be. She's amazing.
Yeah.
She's so good."
Yeah. Should be
Yeah.
in charge.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
her.
And the writer's strike, the actors strike finished, I think, the day before the film released. I think that was
Yeah.
when, and the next night she's in screenings. Now, I'm sure Marvel called her up and said, "Get going." But I mean, she made an appearance in a Toronto theater saying, "Hey, everybody, I'm here."
That's
I'm like,
awesome.
I'm telling you, she's a
Yeah.
star.
Also such a likable person. Like I enjoy watching her interviews. She's doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think they struck gold with her. I really do. I think she's delightful.
Yeah, 100%. All
so-
right, guys.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, and Raven. You are wonderful. Thank you. You are welcome at any time.
I'm so happy to be here. I feel like I have a friends in a tribe now who also want to talk about
Yes.
things. I'm so happy.
You are
Yes,
welcome
yes,
into the
yes.
ScreenFish Fishbowl.
Happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you both. And for you at home, a reminder, you can find us wherever podcasts are available. And you can like and subscribe to us on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram. Instagram, we are at ScreenFish Online. And on YouTube, you can find us at ScreenFish. And of course, if you go to the website at screenfish.net, you can download Fishing for More, which are some small group questions to help you get the conversation started where you are. If you decide to talk about getting swallowed by a flurkin or the incredible togetherness that we see within the characters in this film, it's wonderful. So again, thank you so much to you both. And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was ScreenFish.